I represent a Danish company that used to be called BIPS and now is called Molio, means I build. And I also represent the Danish Mirror Committee for BIM Standardization according to CEN and ISO. And I will take you through a short history about how we have used national and international standards in Denmark for implementation of BIM and the use of the BIM in Denmark. I will take you through it's actually a period of 30 years from the early digital practice. I will tell you a little bit about how we organized and financed it. I will come into Danish development of tools and de facto standards according to BIM levels. And there will be something about the relationship between BIPS, Molio standards, tools, and international standards. And I'll give you a few examples of what we have been doing. All of these tools in Denmark have been developed and implemented for the purpose of collaboration and productivity in co-creation process together with Danish user companies and their specialists. So, the digital and BIM organization and progress in Denmark has been, as you can see, we started out digitally with using AutoCAD back in 1986, and there was made an association for AutoCAD users. We had no public or privately funded programs at all. It changed into ICT users in Denmark because a lot of other programs that AutoCAD were used, and we managed to fusion three companies, the de facto standards for specification, the artifact users in Denmark, and this ICT Users in Denmark association into one association called BIPS that has been going on since 2003. Still, we had no funding, only user subscription for all our tools. For the first time, we had a digital construction program in Denmark back in 2004 to 2007. And we wanted actually to have BIPS participating in that. At that moment, it was also very clear that we had to take a look at standards, how to do things right, not to invent everything by ourselves. It was also clear that a lot of the scopes we had were completely identical for the scopes of Building Smart in Denmark and Building Smart internationally. So we also fusioned Building Smart Denmark into the BIPS association. And then we had a very big project back in 2010, governmental and EU funded, called the CUNECO project. That means common, I think. And it was about having a common structure for integrated BIM to be more able to do better BIM. BIM as information structure for all things, both building models, calculation, maintenance, everything. And we realized that we have even to focus even more on international standards. Now we have fusioned with another company with general construction information into the company called Molio. And what will be our next project? Well, I'll get into that, I think. This has been the roadmap for Danish practice, going from 2D digital to 3D object-based BIM and nearly getting into integrated BIM. The way we have been doing this, we have had all over the years we started out with 300-400 companies, now it's 650 big, medium-sized and small subscribing companies. They subscribe to packets of tools, and they are by that way financing the development and maintaining of these tools. We have involved all stakeholder companies and specialists in those development practices. We have tried to develop for the whole life cycle, not just for consultants or contractors or maintenance organizations, but everybody. And we are now also trying to translate more and more of it into English because Danish companies go abroad, they work abroad, especially the consultant companies. And we have realized that if we didn't involve ICT companies in making the software, implementing our stuff, we had to discuss with them how actually to do it right to have it implemented. We have made a lot of mistakes about that in the future. And what has become very essential is that now every time we're going to do something, we look out for practice internationally, what is being made in other countries. As if possible, we use all international standards as a basis for our work. And also when we have implemented and worked well-working tools in Denmark and standards we think everybody else could benefit from, we try to participate in the work for making good international standards as well. That's where I met some of your colleagues in the CEN work and in the ISO work. There's a UK illustration of BIM levels. I'm not agreeing to everything it says. Actually, I think it's a bit immature, but it can be used for something. And if you are familiar with it, it goes from level 0, that's just being CAD, to level 3, that's really integrated data-based BIM. It is said that if we should be able to make integrated BIM, we need to have common structuring of information, we have to have common language, we have to work with semantics, building smart data dictionary, classification issues, and those kind of things. And also we have to use widely accepted standards like ISO BIM standards. And of course, making data interoperable by IFC property data and that kind of thing is, of course, very, very important. On this scale from level 0 to level 3, where do I think we are in Denmark at the moment? We have been very much into level 1 and level 2 for a very long period. Now we're trying to move ourselves into level 3. Not easy, but I think with the CUNECO project we had a few topics that really makes integrated BIM more possible. We also, by this way, moving from having national tools, standards, you could call them de facto standards, into having more internationally based standards. And that's been very important because our companies want to go abroad, and also if clients want to invite foreign companies to go to Denmark, it has to be on an international basis. So what have we done with this 30 years of digital development for CAD and BIM practice in the UK, in Denmark? In the first years, of course, it was the level 0 to level 1 tools. Up till 2005, I think we did that. From 2005 and on, we had the first digital program. And also in 2007, as you saw on the map before, there was a public client demand legislation to say that we use BIM on all public projects. And that, of course, pushed things a lot. So we made a lot of tools that are actually making our user companies able to also fulfill those demands to implement work to do so. And for the last part, I think we have moved into, some of it is still level 2, but some of it is actually being level 3, trying to do better structuring of information, having more integrated digital practice, making tools that are integratable with other tools and so on. And then we think the next project for us will be to make a model-based digital specification for BIM. That will be the next very, very big project. Let's take a look at those standards we have in Denmark, or these tools or de facto standards we use. Of all the ones I just showed you, these 8 actually are all based on or related to international standards. If we see which standards, we can see it's BIM, ISO BIM, home of the BIM Standards Committee, that has a lot of standards, especially the building smart standards. And we have some standards in the IEC TC3 and ISO TC10 that has a lot of other stuff we have been using. And then we have even used works for ISO works from TC737 and SC1. And the colors actually is a link between the Danish Molio standards and the international standards we used as a basis. And we of course have, as you have in Spain, we have mirror committees in our standardization committee. I'm the chairman of the top one of it. Another one is the chairman of the other one. And the third has not yet really found its right way into digital practice yet. So that is the link between the international standards and what we do. And now we have a more important link that you're also participating in from Spain. We have the CEN TC 442, also mentioned before. That's where it becomes very important to be there to make an influence, because some of these standards might be mandatory to be used in every European country by EU legislation. So that's why it's so important. And when I say that, I'm also in a situation where there are standards proposed, for instance, by the UK, that we don't think are mature enough for us to use, or we have to roll back our development. So you have to be there and make your influence. Let's take a few examples. We have ICT specifications for BIM demands in Denmark. We have had them since 2007. And if the UK proposal for an ISO CEN standard 19650 and 1, 2, and 3 will be mandatory in EU, that would mean that we have to roll that one back to something that's not as good as it is today. So therefore it's very important for us to say it has to be informative, being general, being generic, not being normative. We have 3 models for basic demands, more standardized demands, and for project-specific variations. And then we have some paradigms for people to use to actually describe what kind of digital demands they have, which services they want to have from the client perspective. And we have combined it with an ICT process manual for BIM practice, where it is for the collaboration of the delivery team, how to actually fulfill those demands, how to work with these things together. Before we have those two integrated, but we have an experience throughout 4 or 5 years that the clients tried to be wise about things for the collaboration that they actually were not good at. So therefore we had to divide into clearly defined demands and the way of collaboration. We have had for many years CAD manuals, and the latest one we made actually was about making a 3D object-based BIM modeling practice. And we have discipline models and common models that discipline models can be gathered into. And we have a lot of things explaining how to do stuff there. And this is actually being used by nearly everybody in Denmark, every user company in Denmark that do 3D object modeling and BIM. We have a document information management tool that determines 49 possible metadata set for use on objects, for properties, and for documents in general. It's very important, for instance, if we starting to talk about digital properties, that we are able to provide them with metadata to know the origin, for instance, legislation or standards, or who is going to use them and for what, what's the version, what's the date of the thing. And metadata examples, there are a lot. We will translate this. We have the most common concepts in English, but we'll translate all of it. And metadata is data about data, and also this issue was raised on the latest CEN meeting, that this is very important for a lot of countries. This one is based on the ISO IEC 82045 standards. And it just shows that some of the purposes of this is to make folder structures right, to have right file coding naming, if you want to do that, to make your document or information very searchable. Then the very big work we did with the Cuneco project is totally based on international standards. That's the first construction classification that actually has been made that way. It's based on 5 international standards and the Building Smart thinking, and thereby also by the Building Smart standards, in fact. The overall standard was a framework for classification, but we found out to do the right terminology work and develop right classification system also to be used internationally, we had to look at other standards. We also looked at an 81346 series that both provide us with classification principles for objects and codes for classes, but also with structuring principles and reference designations. Identification is a very big issue when you have to combine one object in a building model with another object in a specification and in a calculation. You have to know that you're talking about the same object. And most BIM practices all over the world, this is not standardized. So we have to standardize it. Looking into other sectors that have been doing that very well, automotive, processes, aeroplanes, and so on. So having the concepts and definitions right, having a right structure, finding an identification issue, having a common language for all objects, to suit all types of modeling. And modeling is very broad. It's not only the building model, it's also modeling with your calculation, you're making simulations, also having maybe a digital specification system. The classification become actually very simple because BIM users don't want to use very complex classification. They want to have a very generic classification, not to change the code throughout the life cycle. It has to be stable. So we have only classified generic objects. And by that we have made 475 object classes. That's actually quite few if you resemble to Uniclass, Omniclass and other. But they come from another age before the BIM age actually, so they had another purpose. So in 3 main classes, using only 1, 2 or 3 letter codes for classifying them. So this was based on ISO 12006-2 and 81346-2 principles. Then we used the same classes to work with the identification issue. And there is those standards from the 81346 series, the part 1, says about how do you do this standardized? How do you do it the same way all the time for all companies? So there were six possible identification: type ID, multi-level type ID, product ID, location, function ID, and so on. This takes time for the construction industry to adapt, because classifying, yes, if they have to, they will do it. They found out they need it actually if they want to have tendering lists working together with building models and tender and specifications. But the thing about identification, there's a lot of creativity and use of we did it the way we did before, or now we do it in some other way. So trying to standardize this is a very big issue to make integrated BIM more possible. And what have we used all this work for internationally? Actually, we have been getting into the revision of the ISO 12006-2 standard about classification to make it more object-oriented and to make it more focusing on the possibilities of BIM. And we have used it for the revision of ISO IEC 81346 to have better classes, have better definitions. We have used it in Building Smart to provide with property data sets and we will provide terms for Building Smart data dictionary. And now we're into a German proposed ISO standard part 12. That's about buildings and building services, how to use this classification and identification principles in those systems. So this has been the Danish travel through BIM. Thank you for your attention, and remember, it's rather complex, but as Niklas Luhmann, a German sociologist, once said, only with complexity you can reduce complexity to make things more simple for people to work with. And also, as a little bit modified, never underestimate the power of the international standards. So, thank you.